now we're going to talk about wedging. You've heard me reference that in other videos, and wedging is something we do to promote plasticity in the clay, which is again the quality that helps the clay hold its shape and do what you want it to do. And it also helps remove air that could be in the clay. So like if you're using clay that has already been thrown with, it'll have developed air pockets from you smashing it down. You need to get those out. It will also help incorporate different consistencies of clay. So if you have some clay that's really soft and some clay that's a little bit firmer than that, you can work those together by doing slices of them and then wedging them. So I'm going to show you two different styles of wedging. I'm going to cut a piece of this clay. With my wire tool. I always just choke up on the wire tool and cut through. Wire tools are great. They don't have a lot of surface area, so they drag through the clay without sticking. Okay, so I've got a lump of clay. It needs to be wedged. Ram's head wedging is a symmetrical wedge. So first of all, you need to notice that I'm standing, I'm not sitting, because I need to be able to use my whole body to move this clay and not just my arms. If I'm just using my arms, I'll get tired really fast. So I want to be able to rock my whole body back and forth to be able to do this. I actually will stand like with one foot forward so I can kind of move forward with it. Symmetrical wedge, I'm going to push down with the heels of my hands onto the clay, but I'm not like smearing it across the table. If it just does nothing but stick down to the table, it's probably a little too soft yet. You need to let it firm up a little bit more. So you can see if I roll this forward, I've made impressions in the clay with the heels of my hand. My hands are here. I'm going to pull this clay up onto the tail I've made in the back, but not all the way over so that it like folds. I want to continue pushing but not create air pockets by folding it. So I'm going to push down again, and you can see that I've made more of a divot and it's starting to twist on itself a bit, which is what we're looking for. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to pull it up on that tail, but not all the way. Push down, holding the clay in with this part of my hand so it doesn't start walking out. And as I do this, you're going to see that the clay is wrapping around itself, and you can see all those kind of like pushes that I've made, and you can kind of start to see why it's called ram's head. It makes something that looks kind of like a ram's head. Now the pressure I'm exerting on the sides keeps it from just walking out, and instead it's pushing into itself and around itself. And it's bringing the clay that was on the inside out to the outside, which pushes air bubbles out. So you're probably going to ask, how much do I wedge? And that's going to depend on your clay. Are you trying to incorporate different textures? Do you know that there's a lot of air bubbles in your clay? Do you have a lot of clay that you're trying to wedge? It's all going to depend. And it kind of takes time to get a feel for when you think it might be done. And a lot of times, if you're not sure, you can excuse me, you can cut the piece in half with the wire and see where you're at. Then you'll have to obviously wedge it some more to put it back together. But you can kind of slap it back together and it wouldn't have too many air pockets in there. So when you feel like you're good, you want to start getting this back into a ball. So I'm going to start applying less pressure and kind of roll up that tail. And you can see it's kind of rolled up now. And I've got these sides, and the sides have some, you can see the spiral I've made, and they have some places where I could trap air if I wasn't being careful. But I'm going to be careful with how I bring this back together. Instead of just hitting it on the sides, I'm going to start from the inside and start kind of compressing it so that I push any potential air pockets out rather than just smashing them down. So if I start from the center and work my way out, I'm ensuring that I'm not trapping air between those layers. And do the same over here. And once I'm comfortable with not trapping anything, I can start to form this into the shape I need, cut it up into smaller pieces, whatever it is that I need. The other way to wedge is called a spiral wedge. And it's a similar motion, but it's not symmetrical. So with the spiral wedge, your left hand is sort of the helper, and your right hand's doing a lot of the pushing. So I've got my piece of clay. I'm going to push down like I did with the ram's head, but only with the right hand. And you can see the difference already of the way that clay is pushed on one side but not the other. So I've pushed down. I'm going to pull back with my left hand and pull it up onto the tail. But again, just like with the ram's head, I'm not pulling it all the way up and back so that it folds over. It's kind of a partial pull, and then I'm going to push down again with my right hand, supporting with my left. And you can see that it starts to become a spiral. It looks kind of like a conch shell. And now, this clay was already a good consistency. I've wedged it once before, and it's starting to develop these surface cracks because it really doesn't need to be wedged again. And wedging, as you can kind of see on the table, how it has a wet spot, it draws moisture out of the clay. So this clay doesn't really need more moisture drawn out of it. But since this is just for demonstration, we'll go with it. So again, I'm pushing kind of down and out with my right heel of my hand and pulling it back with the left. And once again, when I feel like it has been wedged enough, I want to roll it up onto itself to get that tail rolled in. Can kind of push it down, again working from the inside to the out so you're not trapping air. And I need to do the same thing with the bottom of this like I did with the ends of the ram's head and collapse this in without trapping air into it. So starting from the inside, moving to the outside, making sure I'm not trapping air between any of the layers. And once I'm happy with that, I can kind of hit it in. One thing to note, if you're wedging for throwing, which you will need to do, you'll want to wedge your clay for that, is, so I wedged this piece of clay, and the spiral is going in this direction. So if this was my wheel head and I put it down, the wheel would be spinning in this direction, this plane, and the clay would be spinning in this plane. So all the spinning is happening in the same plane. That can lead to cracks that develop in your piece because there's so much tension in the piece and it's all going in the same plane. Whereas if I would take my clay and put it 90 degrees to its axis of rotation, then my wheel head is still going around like this, but my clay was wedged like this. And so it helps to counteract that rotation and helps to prevent those cracks. So that's just a hint for when we're doing a throwing.